Welcome in, Shield Brothers and Shield Maidens, to Shield's Rest. I'm Fry,
I'm Brown.
And I'm true.
and today we're going to be taking a little dive into the Smith-Shimano Corpro, how you can utilize it for your campaign and to influence your pilot's backgrounds. So let's mount up.
Whether it's your first time watching or you're a returning viewer to Shield's Rest, we'd appreciate if you would like, comment, or subscribe, and maybe even share with a friend. Fry, what can you tell us about Smith-Shimano Corpro?
All right, so they are, talk a little bit about their past first, right? Real quick. They are the second oldest manufacturer in the history of Lancer, so dating back to the second era. Um, Outside of the GMS, so the ones who make the Everest and things like that, outside of them. So when it comes to the big three, big four, they are the oldest ones there. They they started out really into like human mech symbiosis. They kind of wanted to create like the perfect being. And that was their primary focus, doing this cutting edge human machine integration tech. Then an event known as the Deimos event happened. That can probably be a whole video on its own, but kind of like a brief cap over that is essentially a NHP, this non-human person's entity, was created. How he was created is up to debate, and that's kind of like in the GM determines really how that kind of happened, but it was kind of thought into existence by other AIs, this whole thing. He takes over Deimos, which is a moon, through all their technologies and stuff, and then he blips that moon out of existence, disappears for a year ish. It blips back into existence and basically tells the human populace, hey, stop trying to advance your AI human integration. And that was basically written into law. That's a long story short. But post that, they moved away from the integration as per the laws and now focus more on just the genetic side of things, whereas where they are now in the lore. So they've kind of shifted to genetic tailoring and cybernetics as opposed to actually integrating humans with machines. That's where they were in the past leading up to now.
I don't know that I would have liked them working on my body genetically, but I think the exoskeleton type thing is really cool. So enhancing our capabilities, I can get behind that.
Yeah. So that's where they start. And so where they are now, location wise and like territory wise, they actually don't have a lot of physical space taken. They have some planets here and there that they have in their field, so to speak. But their primary, like I said, thing is genetic modification. So they kind of like get these populations that have some sort of genetic material or something in their ancestry that is a positive that they want, and they basically either build up those planets or kind of inject more kind of like genetic manipulation, right? Like they'll insert maybe a certain populace into them so that they start having more families, and that's basically their thing. Is they're like it's almost like a weird breeding program in some cases, so it can get a little iffy depending on the planet. But that's kind of what they do now, as far as like a major corporation goes, is to spin up these nice genetics, gene pools and stuff, and then can get into the weirder or the darker side of stuff where they're almost like selling these planets to maybe big billionaires, stuff like that, or whatever you want to call them. But that's kind of the business they're in now, is how can we make the human populace better physically.
Well, that's interesting because I think we were talking about Harrison Armory that are considered typically like your space Nazis, but this sounds a little more on par than Harrison Armory. Just saying.
Absolutely, yeah. So, uh, and I think in the grand scheme of things, it's they mean well, and it's not like they're capturing planets and like forcing them down and like you will do this. They try to take care of the populace best way, but like at the end of the day, they are looking for like
It's just
specific genetics that they want
pure
to protect.
manipulation. It's like, let us help you
Yeah,
so that we can help ourselves.
Yep.
absolutely. And then so that's basically the territory and their population, right? So it's technically like a small population or small territory when you're looking, like you said, at Harrison Army. They're more like I'm going to capture all these planets and this whole sector of this galaxy is mine. Whereas they're more like they kind of pick and choose the specific planets that they want. And the way they connect is they basically have this whole AI cyberspace that they can all kind of link up to. And that's how they'll like kind of meet up for meetings, so they can be planets away, and then they all kind of link up in this like VR system, which is like its own building and everything that they'll kind of like meet up in. And that's like they're almost central. That's where they usually meet up as a corporation, is in this like virtual world. They do have like a planet here and there, and they do have like a one physical headquarters, but that's mainly their thing, is this virtual reality space that is ran and protected by these NHP entities, these non-human persons that kind of safeguard the system and all that and do all that. So they're still on that AI NHP side of things. It's just less integrating to the human body and more like how can we use it to advance things.
Sounds a lot like the military.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I suppose that does generate a quick little question here. So you're talking about them capturing planets. In what way, shape, or form is there like a government that's deciding this thing? Are the companies like going to war with each other, or is it like small little skirmishes with each other, or is it just like wild space and they're just capturing planets by just colonizing it? Like, what are we talking about?
So ultimately, they, at least on paper and to the general populace, is they're working with Union. So Union is the government entity that approaches these planets and says, "Hey, we want to like bring you into our society. We'll provide you with food, water, protection, whatever it is that you need." And once they're in within that territory of Union, that's when the manufacturers kind of like try to do their things with the planets. Is the most like general accepted answer, I would think, is like kind of how it works. Now, obviously, there might be some shadier sides of things where they like maybe swoop in and they have some planets not being tracked, or Union may say no to Union and whatever, they move on, and then maybe a manufacturer comes in and swoops in afterwards. Um, and even in that scenario where Union does want to take them in and they say no, it could lead to a skirmish, and that's where you'll send like lancers in to be like, "Hey, we're gonna do this," because if they just don't want to be part of it is one thing, but if they're like, no, because we have slaves, and Union says we can't do that anymore, now they want to like stop them from doing that. So that's where you can lead into skirmishes if the planets are doing something that they think is immoral, and they'll kind of back and forth and all that. But that's basically Union gets the planets, and then the manufacturers kind of like have their disputes, so to speak. They don't necessarily go to war with each other for the most part. They're civil in the public light, but that's more on this shadier side of things, where particularly with the SSC, they have a non-confirmed, almost black ops team that no one has proved that they exist or whatever, but they probably exist, right? And then that's how they might sneak in around the other manufacturers.
Huh?
Are there like planetary auctions? Like, because you're saying like I'm just trying to wrap my brain around it. So once they're in Union, does Union then like? Because how would a manufacturer like how would SSC over another manufacturer like get connected to a planet? Is it like a leader
Bidding
of that
war.
planet's like, hey, we like you better, or is it like a planetary auction kind of thing? Because that sounds really cool if that exists.
And I think that's where it would more so depend on like you as the GM, right? So how does that fit in the and it could have been a detail I've missed in the book. It's a big book, but I didn't see necessarily on like how there's not like a set rule on like this is who gets what planet and how. It's more so maybe you're there at the right place at the right time, or it could just be maybe Union says, "Hey, this is a good fit for you," and all that. It's not necessarily to, at least in the SSC, I think, side of things, where they like have a stake on the whole planet, but it might be this specific population on this continent of the planet will like set up a hub here. They always have a representative there at the planet, so it's not necessarily that they're like, "This is my planet," flag in the ground, so to speak, but they have like people there who are kind of manipulating, helping the situation, all that. So I guess that's where I would say a better term for it would be like they have influence on a planet, not necessarily owning the planet, because they are just a part of Union, so to speak. And once you're in Union, Union provides you with the things you need to live, and they kind of just leave you alone, um, so to speak. So they
Oh, that
kind
makes
of
sense. Yeah, I mean, like sending representatives to planets or something to like start their own little communities and then just kind of using that.
yeah.
Sounds
So
like
I'd say
something
it
they
would
could do,
almost be
huh?
more political, I would think. So it's you go in and you try to make your influence to the local government, and whether they want to keep you there or they want to reject your help. It's kind of on the person or the team that they send to do all that.
Hmm. Well, in our one shot that we eventually do, I want to see a planetary auction. I
Yeah.
want
Oh
to see
yeah.
I'll have that in.
a planetary dealer or something like that's got to be a character in the episode.
And and there's definitely, I'm sure, like areas out on like what I would call like the rim, right outside at the very edge, or even past where Union is. I'm sure that's a thing on another entity
There's like
somewhere.
retired, busted
That
up
is on the map.
lancers that are going out and
Yeah.
taking planets to work with dealers. Or we're getting off track, but sorry,
I mean, that
that's
would
some
be a
cool
cool.
stuff. My
That would
my
be a
brain's
good one.
going. But I guess I mean it kind of ties into. Sorry if you have another point you wanted to mention first, but
Oh,
if
no,
I'm
go ahead.
remembering, we were planning on having like a colonist background.
Mhm.
Yeah.
How would that tie into like? Do we work for SSC or with SSC? And if we're colonists in nature, does that play into anything?
So you could go either way, right? Like maybe you are one of the colonies that they have like kind of genetically like almost groomed, right, to like be this superior being. Like you could be
I
one
could
of
think of
them.
that.
So now it's
Yeah.
like you've grown up in this community that has this oversight of them. So maybe you're like, yeah, why wouldn't I work for them, right? Like
All right,
they've
true. We were
given me
grown in a
everything.
lab.
Yep.
I'm
So
behind that.
Lab,
I'm all about that. Yeah.
just lab babies.
Just a
And
couple of
then
lab
it could
brothers.
Yeah, I
and then
love
it could
that.
just be on the opposite side, right? You could see that as like maybe you're a colony that was completely uninfluenced, and then you like travel to this planet and you see where SSC has had their influence and they have this almost just genetic human farm, and you think, wow, that's disgusting. Someone should say something about this because it's weird.
So what you're saying is now we're lab brothers born and raised to fight inside SSC against them. We're like double agents. I see where this
Yeah,
can
you
go.
could be the Black Ops team that they didn't even
Yeah.
know.
It was us the whole time. Yeah.
And you could even be what's called the SSC has their own CDC, but this is the Congressional Diplomatic Corps. These are teams that basically scout out planets and communities for these like genetic advances, right? So you could even end up on the where they'll like send you to a planet and they're like, this planet just got into Union, go in there, scout, see what you can find. Is there a populace or whatever that we would like to add to our repertoire, right? And then so that could be your jobs where you're just hired by them to scout out these planets. You find one or you find this population, you set up. They usually get they call them frames, I think it was. Not frames, no, sorry, platforms. It's like a special spacecraft that'll float above the planet or within the atmosphere, wherever, and that's where your operation will be. You'll go out, do your scouting, get your information, do your reports, and once you're done, you load back up, go on to a new planet. You just kind of have this like flying hub in the air doing your scouts and stuff. So this could be another thing your campaign could be based around is you scouting out these planets, and maybe you find the populace, but they have XYZ problem. They need this aggressive entity stopped, and then they'll agree to help you, and that's where you can like kind of build a campaign around planet hopping, looking for genetically superior beings, and then deal with that emotionally and be okay with that.
Yeah. So lots of ways we can take this. I guess we'll see what happens.
And then that kind of, I would say, it almost leads into like the public opinion, right? So how do the people see them outside of that, whether you're in those communities or not? And I would think for the most part, people are almost okay with it in the sense of like the galaxy is so expansive, right? Where like we go overseas, right, and we get to go in and see these other countries and all that. But for a person who only stays in the United States, I would almost compare it to that. It's like what does a common person know about Europe or the Middle East or South America, anything like that? It was where I would almost equate to like how the public opinion is. So you just hear this planet, they go in, they find a population, They give them food, water, make their life nice. Probably okay. I don't know. So it's one of those. It depends on like how close you are to it, and especially once you're in one of those colonies, how do you feel about it? Did you grow up in it? Were you always there, and then they showed up and they started doing all this manipulation? So it really, that's where you can almost decide, like, as a player, do I want them to be allies or do I not want them to be allies? And you basically pick where you are in that pecking order.
So if I remember the core or the core worlds, that's like all of the ones that are under second command. Like that's like the main planets or areas. That's called the core, I believe. So I
Yeah,
imagine
so
that
that's basically,
their opinion of SSC is probably different than like a colonial world that's off by itself that doesn't it's not involved with that yet. So is SSC like, I guess, are they like a top of the line? Because what I think I know about them is that they have like really nice mechs and they're kind of like top of the line as far as like the look and style. Is that kind of the? Is it fair to say that's the thought train of people that are in the core worlds, like what they think of SSC?
yeah, so SSC is the designer bags of our world, right? It's the Louis Vuitton, the Prada, like that is SSC. They're all about sleek style, money. If you see someone in a SSC mech, you know they either got money, they have power, they have influence, is the perception that they have. Whether that's true or not is one thing, but that is the perception you're going to have of them. And you kind of see it in the mechs themselves too. They are very sleek, polished. We're looking at maybe Harrison Armory, right? They're big, they're bulky, heavy, like they look like power. Whereas like SSC is like very sleek, very expensive, luxury. I think there's a Lux brand, like a luxury line, so to speak, within SSC. So that is, I think, the perception of them maybe in the more of those core worlds where they're not seeing as much influence. But if you see a pilot that has like a SSC license, you'll do the double take on them for sure, I think.
Yeah, I think that gives a lot of room for variety in the way that you bring about these stories and the different some of the different encounters that you can kind of do and some of the different arcs that you could do while incorporating SSC, whether you work for them, whether you don't, whether you've been a part of them this entire time, whether you're against them, whatever. I think that provides a lot of interesting conflict possibilities, anyways. Whether that is you putting down a colony that is, rebelling in some way, shape, or form. I think there's a lot of fun story elements in there, especially when you're doing space Nazi shit, genetically altering people and trying to make them better.
Yeah, I think it would even be like good as in an ambassador sense, right? Like, so if you show up to a planet, cool is one thing as a rep, but you show up with these lancers who have these super high tech looking mechs that are, even though they have moved away from the integrated side of things as far as human goes, the mechs themselves actually still have that. So you see it in the core bonuses, in the kind of the flavor description of it, is like they actually will integrate to their mechs. I would almost compare it to like Pacific Rim, that movie, where like it kind of locks into like their mind and their nodes and all that. So whereas like maybe a Harrison, like the other Harrison Army and stuff, they're actually piloting their mechs. Theirs is like hooked up to their body and they act it out instead also. So it's like that sense of advanced technology. Like you look, I would say it's almost like a show of power and professionalism is how I would see it, as if you show up. So you can be an ambassador team where you're almost there just for a show of power. Obviously you're in a campaign, so you actually be utilized. But I could see them being that as well, where it's you are the backup, so to speak.
That makes me think of a few questions.
Yeah,
Yeah,
One
right.
question, maybe I'll ask them both, and then you can probably answer them together. So, one question is, what do the other manufacturers think of SSC? And then that ties into maybe, is there like a top rep for each one that meets and discusses like higher level, like political or whatever strategies? Like, do the manufacturers work together in that sense? Like, does SSC work with any other manufacturer as they're doing these, farmings of people and whatnot?
I'm sure in very loose senses, I don't think they would have necessarily, a business plan with each other. I think with anyone, it would be the IPNS, since their especially is almost like semi-truckers for the galaxy. They're all about transporting and stuff like that. So I could see them maybe having maybe contracts with them and stuff like that. I think their biggest head-to-head would be Harrison Armory, just because of their conflicting maybe views, but also just in the way that they operate. SSC is more maybe subtle. They're more so focused on people and things like that, whereas Harrison Army is about territory, which we'll get into them a little later. But the way they operate and their philosophies are so different. They are civil in the open, but I think they are the most antagonistic towards each other behind the scenes. And then
Gotcha.
Horus is its own thing, which we'll get into with them. But they are technically not a major manufacturer, but we'll get into that one later.
Are we like subcontractors, or do we work for SSC, or like I guess
It
how does it
feels like there's a
typically
lot of
work?
options.
Yeah, because like it would be
Yeah,
cool to be like a sub,
it's-
like we're not related to them, but we can use their licenses and stuff, right? We're just like
Yeah,
paying
that's
for them, I would imagine. But we're
so a lot of that.
fighting in their mechs and in their name, so it's I just can't wrap my head around like how are we using their stuff if we're not like dedicated to them.
So with the way the game is kind of built in the lore, right? So if you're just looking at mechanics, right, you have it because you have it. There's no limit. Just like in D&D, if you want to multi-class, you multi-class. You don't have to like come up with a reason technically per book. What I would equate it to is, say you get your SSC license. You might hate Honda, right? But that's not going to stop you from going to a Honda dealership and buying a Honda. It's the same with like these manufacturers. You could disagree with them, but if you're like, they suck, but like I really want that mech because it's going to do what I need to do on my mission, you can go get the license to that mech. And then once you have that license, that code, you take it to a 3D printer and print it. I'm sure if they wanted to stop you not looking at game mechanics, right? If you're talking from a pure lore perspective, there might be a way for them to like blacklist you from using that code. But at the end of the day, you have the item, you have the code, you go to the printer, you put it in, and you can print it. So that's how you can kind of get these mechs when you could be fighting the mech, but you can still use them because in that sense, they can't stop you once you have the license. It's almost like having the car key. Like I have the car key, you can't turn my car off because I have it.
Is there jail? Like, do
And you
people get
can
locked up for
steal it. Like
misusing licenses?
maybe like a darker campaign, right? And you're like, we want to steal some SSC licenses. That could be your license level 0 mission, right? You go in and you find a group of SSC Lancers and you kill them and you get their bodies and you take their license key from them. Boom, you just got your SSC frames in story by
sounds like
stealing.
some Gundam shit right there. They
Yeah.
did that in one of the shows where basically they ran in, stole the freaking mechs, and blasted out of there and killed everybody in the process. So yeah, just saying.
Maybe that's our one shot.
And then
That's our one
and
shot. Let's do that.
say you're in one of those
We're
colonies
sick
that
of
they
SSC and
like
we've
have.
retired.
Yeah.
And maybe that colony is specifically to get Lancers, right? You've now proven yourself and you don't even have to buy it. They hand it to you because you're a Lancer, you're a representation of them, so they give you whatever you need to go represent them out in public. So there are a bunch of different ways you can go, I think, with it on either side. If you want to be against SSC, but you still want to use the frame as a player, okay, how'd you get it? Did you steal it? Did you kill someone for it?
Doesn't matter.
Or, yeah,
Doesn't matter.
Don't ask
doesn't
questions.
matter. Don't ask.
Yeah.
Just rolling around in a Jaguar. Doesn't matter where
Yeah.
it came from.
SSC in particular, it's nice. I think they have in the lore the most built-in kind of options just because they have so many teams, right? You have this mysterious Black Ops team, you have this CDC team, you have these ambassador teams. So they have a lot of ways you can play kind of for or against them, depending on which aspect of it you like. One for the topic, and then do you want to be pro it or against it? And then that flavors which side of the fight you're on. Talking on the topic, like how you get these mechs, the kind of pilot that wants an SSC mech. I think, at least for me off the top of my head, you could go a couple different ways, right? If you just want to be the guy that looks like he has money, looks like he has power, maybe a little shallow reason why, but that could be maybe you just want to play that guy. He's just super simple. I just want to look cool. SSC mech it is. I think that's where I would go with that kind of character. Whereas maybe he's rich kid nepo baby. That's what I'm going with. I'm gonna pick an SSC for him. Or you could even do, like I said, with your colony side, if you're pro that, if you're pro this genetic betterment of society, that as well. And then if you want to get into that espionage side, I think SSC is a really good fit for that as well. Just because the rumors there, right? Rumors are there for a reason. Once you're getting into that side as the pilot, as the character itself, if you're looking to be that guy, SSC is the way to go. I don't see the other two big manufacturers like Harrison Army and all that being as spec ops as SSC would be. Not only are they, kind of planet hopping as a mission, like they're going there for specific things, but they also, have this virtual reality meeting world that they all kind of like hook into. Like they're already on that kind of side of the universe, so to speak. So I think that is a good way. That's how I think I would use them if I was going to focus a campaign around them as the protagonist, like maybe as your patron or anything. I would like to run them as a spec ops game, I think.
I couldn't imagine it any other way, in all honesty. As I was looking at these, I mean, they are very much so built for stealth. They're built for camouflage. They're built for hitting hard and fast and then gone. And that's the entire point. So I could easily see that being the main point of that campaign if we go like head first, right in the SSC.
I know. I was, as you were talking about building your pile and all that, and I just thought it was funny because it was, when it came from a campaign standpoint, like a plot standpoint, you just described SSC to a T. And then once you got to like, but I want my mech to do this, it was like, oh, that's Harrison Armory. And you were such a like, and I think as watching it level up, I think it will be fun to see like how you balance it. Because of course, after you get your main mech, you can dip into SSC and just start pulling all those abilities over. So you can be this big buster tank, and then you try and maybe nab a blink ability from an SSC thing. So you're just this blipping giant artillery unit. But
I was thinking about it almost in reverse a little bit as I was looking at Death's Head. I was kind of thinking about like maybe going the opposite route where I get this thing that can move pretty quickly around the battlefield and be able to do some good stuff, but then throw a massive weapon on top and just go blasting.
Yeah, I think Death's Head is my favorite out of SSC. Reading through them, I love the Death's Head. It's so cool.
Yeah, no, that one looked really cool, and it looks like something out of almost like a Japanese horror anime, almost. Just the way that it's designed and the way it looks like with the legs and the little arms that are just kind of underneath it looks real weird, just a little bit.
If I see that thing coming, I'm running.
Hell yeah! If you see it coming, that's the main thing. You might be dead by the time you see it.
Or it's probably already there, and you just walk into its range, and then you're going.
What the hell?
Kind of wrapping up, like how are we using this as a campaign, right? So we've talked a lot about, I think, player options, how you can be for or against, and what your opinion can be of them depending on where you are. But how do you use them as a GM, right? If you're pro, I think it's a little easier. If you want to use them as a constant, maybe patron, all that, I think it's going to be really easy because you just read through and you pick the team that you want to run. Whether, like I said, whether it's that spec ops teams, whether it's that CDC team or those ambassador teams, I think those are going to be real easy kills. And I think SSC in particular, but all of them kind of can because they're all about, exploring the galaxy. But I think for them, if you want to run a planet hopping campaign, I think SSC is the way to go. So that's where I think I would take them, is either, or if you wanted to be on that planet, that's where I think I would do more spec ops, because I think that kind of goes towards a singular planet more, unless you're trying to take out, if you're trying to just take out Harrison Armory and you're trying to take out their key people, you might have to planet hop a bit, right? But I think that's where I would want to use them, is either if it's a single planet spec ops, or if you want to do those CDC teams and just planet hop, and that way each little arc can just be a new planet and you can keep it fresh and rolling. So that's where I think how I would use them as a campaign source for the pro. But for antagonistically, like if you want to use them as a bad guy, I think I would. You have to take those communities that have seen those dark sides of them, where they've like kind of they told Union, yeah, hey, everything's nice, fine, and easy, and then like you take a closer look, and they're picking and choosing and having these weird. There's nothing necessarily in the lore about it, but you just take the dark side of that, right? Like they got a human farm planet. That's where I would take them with that. It's the kind of darker side of humanity where it's when someone's like looking the other way, kind of in the shadows, what's going on as far as population control goes, and that's where I would use them as the enemy there. Is these like, or it's hey, they didn't actually stop, and they have this crazy human brainwash robot army on this planet that's hidden behind. They hide it on the backside, the dark side of the moon, right? So no one ever kind of sees it unless they actually go and visit it. And now they found this like weird human alien hybrid thing that they've created. Like get into the genetic, like that body horror style campaign, I think, where they've just made like this anomaly is where I would take them there. Now I think that about covers it for Bowheader. I talked a little about where they were, where they are now, how you can kind of utilize them in your campaign. What I think I want to cover next, which we'll bring up in the next video, is looking at the mechs, kind of breaking them down. One, how you can use that mech, flavor that mech to your pilot, or what kind of pilot would want that mech just based on the build, as well as just looking at them, how they play, and what they represent as far as the SSC goes. So a little bit of a, not necessarily a super deep dive. We're not going to be making builds or anything yet on those, but I just want to take a look at them individually and see how you can use them in your games from a role play lore perspective, not just as a build. And with that, let's run a little sneak peek at what we have in store for them. And that. Well, until next time, keep that shield wall strong.